please. So Model B is obviously, as it relates to the labor costs, in the best interest of StarKist. And so the point of this study or these two slides is to emphasize or share that we're already walking on thin ice as it relates to StarKist and the competitive advantage that American Samoa holds for the cannery. Next slide, please. So if, in fact, the actions being proposed do lead to the closure of our one remaining cannery, what happens next? Obviously, the first thing that we'll see, well, maybe it won't be the first thing, but the most obvious thing that will take place is that we'll see massive layoffs. Based off of the 2021 Department of Commerce Statistical Yearbook, the cannery employment numbers are sat at 2,631 jobs. We estimate that for every one cannery job, there is another non-cannery job that exists in our private sector. So it's a one-for-one estimate. And so you have another 2,631 jobs in the private sector that are directly linked to the cannery jobs. And then you have all other, and the total employment for the territory is 17,018. And so as you can see in the far right, the cannery is responsible for 30% of our workforce, and that would be a significant number to see one day just become unemployed. And it's frightening to think about, but those of us who were here in 2009 remember how that felt when the other cannery closed. Next slide, please. So again, really quick back of the envelope calculations using an average annual wage, and this is a very conservative number, $15,000 a year, and multiplying that against the total number of jobs lost. The total wages we see lost, almost hit $79 million, and of that, we also will see significant loss in revenues generated for ASG. A little over $3 million in just personal income tax is immediately lost. The slide doesn't talk to the jobs that exist on the purse-seiners or the longliners, and so you have to take those jobs and salaries into consideration. And also the corporate taxes that are paid by the cannery, those numbers are confidential. I didn't have those, but they're assumed to be pretty significant. And then also corporate taxes lost by businesses, local businesses, who will see a loss in revenue as a result of the closure of the cannery. One additional thing I wanted to point out, the bottom line, remittances to independent Samoa from March to December of 2021 amount to $18.6 million. And so, again, yesterday we talked a lot about the Samoan people being one people. Of course, we're divided politically, but these actions aren't restricted to our territorial boundaries. Our neighbors, our brothers, and our sisters in independent Samoa will also be impacted. Next slide, please. All right, so other impacts. So we started off with layoffs, impacts on local purchases by fishing fleet. This was discussed a lot yesterday as well, and some today. But of course, the fishing fleet, specifically with fuel, and Taula spoke to this yesterday, we'll see significant losses there as well. One purse-seiner may take 8 trips a year. An average of 110,000 gallons of fuel is used per trip, and at a $3.50 per gallon cost, you're looking at $385,000 per trip, or over $3 million per year in fuel. So these fuel sales are, of course, lost if the cannery does close. I have 15 remaining purse-seiners up there. I've heard 15, 14, and 13. Either way, it's really low, but still their contribution in terms of fuel purchases is quite significant. You're looking at $46 million annually. And of course, the loss of fuel, as we've discussed, being sold to the ships and of course to StarKist, who per Ryan's discussion yesterday, the cannery, I guess, utilizes 30% of the power generated in ASPA. These costs end up having to be spread to everybody else. And so we all will end up picking up the tab, if you will. The graph to the right is a very recent graph. Just in the last quarter of 2022, we saw a spike in inflation due to surging fuel prices. At one point, at its high point, inflation locally hit 13.5%. And that makes it really, really difficult on families living here in the territory. Next slide, please. So that was impacts on local purchases by the fishing fleet for fuel. The same applies for goods. There are a number of businesses, wholesale and retail, that support the purse-seining fleet through the sale of goods and stores and supplies. Between 2017 and 2019, there were 247 purse-seiner calls at Pago Pago Harbor. Each represented about a $400,000 purchase, or $33 million per year. Again, that's pretty significant a contribution to the economy. If you imagine that just being yanked, the wholesalers will need to, of course, recoup, profits, and that typically happens by increasing costs, for everybody else, for the rest of the community. And of course, we've also talked a lot about the significant decrease in purse-seiners over the years. 40 vessels in 2015 down to 13 in 2023. Again, we've seen this a lot over the last day and a half, just how that has impacted the territory. I do note here that this does not include our longliners, and so these numbers are, again, underestimates. Next slide, please. Impacts on trade. Obviously, if the cannery departs, our exports go to near zero. The cannery represents 99% of the territory's exports. And so if you look at the top two rows, the second row are actual numbers. So in 2021, our trade deficit, all the way over to the right-hand column, sat at 573,860. That's the trade deficit. You pull the exports or the cannery out of this scenario, and you'll see that number jump. The deficit obviously jumps up approximately 10%, so 625,093 is the number. And so again, we see a really impactful hit on our trade deficit. Next slide, please. GDP was brought up earlier, and I'm going to invite Director Petit up here to speak a little bit to our GDP. But obviously, when your exports go to near zero, you'll see a significant hit on your GDP. The BEA has conducted a study on our GDP. I believe it's every year or every other year for the past few years, and again, obviously the exiting of the StarKist will have a significant impact on our territorial GDP. So, Director Petit, if I may ask you to join me.
Talofa, and good afternoon. As you can see there, sorry, I know it's a bit blurry, but this is a graph of our GDP within 2020 and 2021. This information is compiled or made available every year in partnership with the Bureau of Economic Analysis. So this is just a snippet of, the information that's normally provided through the GDP rate for American Samoa, but this information can go all the way back to 10 plus years. So you can see the trend in our economic status over the years. So But before I delve into that, I think it's very important to mention this or introduce some of the brief information about Department of Commerce, because it helps answer some of the questions that were alluded to in the previous presentation. So for everybody's understanding, especially our federal partners, the mission of the Department of Commerce is really to improve the quality of life in American Samoa through economic development and sustainable resource management. That is our target, goal, and overall objective on a daily basis. But in order for us to achieve that, we work through various different subdivisions in our department, which I think would be very important for our federal partners to know who they can tap into for some of the information and the data resources that they'll need. So we do house the Statistics and Analysis Division for the Government of American Samoa. So whatever data that you need, economic related data, you can come to the Department of Commerce for that type of information. We also do business, trade, and investments. We are the agency that you go to register for a business license. So small business data information, you can come to us for that information as well. We also do urban planning and development, which also delves into what we are doing on economic diversification and economic development as a whole for the entire territory. We also do natural resource management. This is where our Coastal Zone Management Program is housed. And so a lot of the federal consistency certifications and determinations are done through our department because we do land use permitting on a daily basis. This is our environmental review, our local environmental review process through what we call the Project Notification Review System, or PNRS for short, if you hear it down the line. But and also I want to briefly mention that earlier this year, Governor Lamanu and Lieutenant Governor Talawenga designated the Department of Commerce to be the broadband coordinating office for the American Samoa government. And also in addition to that, we are the leading agency for geographic information systems all across the territory. So I do know that some of this information is going to be helpful to you to get some answers in preparation for the economic impact analysis. But two words do really describe our discussions yesterday and today, and that is the ripple effects of this proposed sanctuary on the economy of American Samoa. So we thought we'd give you a snippet of what that impact looks like using some of the most recent data that we have. So given the 2020 and 2021 GDP rates, in 2020, there was an increase in our GDP rate due to significant contributions from government and private sector. The private sector, for the most part, is actually reflected through the exports that are generated by our key industry, which is the fisheries industry, or the Starkist tuna factory here in American Samoa. So our export numbers went up in 2020. That was because of the increase in canned tuna exports and related products. Also keep in mind that this was around the time American Samoa was impacted with the measles outbreak and also with the starting of the COVID pandemic, restrictions. So one of the key decisions by our leaders at the time was to continue letting the Starkist operate during COVID. Why? Because it was considered an essential service or business at the time. We could not afford to have Starkist shut down within a certain period of time because of the economic outcomes that it would create because of that. So as we can see through the GDP rate in 2020, our exports continue to rise because of the tuna exports. Even through our private inventory, it was the growth in supplies held by the tuna canning industry that allowed us to have an upward trend in our GDP. On the government sector side, this is where government spending is involved, especially through federal grants and revenues. Also, we also want to reference during the pandemic, there was a lot of federal resources coming through our territory on top of our own regular, allocations throughout the year. So there was a spike in our federal revenues, our federal resources at the time, and that's reflected through the GDP at the time. For private sector, aside from StarKist driving that upward trend, there were other supporting sectors or industries that were positively impacted because of the opening of the canneries. Good example are retail shops. Stores remained open and people had to go shop. We even received like stimulus or relief funding at the time, so there was a lot of consumption spending at the time. So even stores were running out of stock because of so much money in the hands of the people that there was a lot of consumption spending at the time. But a little bit before that, I do want to mention that the GDP in 2019 had a 0.6% drop. However, that was because there was an increase in public sector spending that helped us kind of offset that number. But we want to indicate that that decline, the overall decline in 2019 was due to both manufacturing, aka our decline in canned tuna output, and non-manufacturing, or decreases in industries previously supported through reconstruction activities associated with Tropical Cyclone Gita. I do want to reference that there were natural disasters that impacted American Samoa, that some of the revenues came through there in which they contributed to our local consumption spending. So it's a fact that StarKist is our largest private sector employer on the island, but we do want to mention that we are proud to say that StarKist provides premium quality canned tuna made here in American Samoa. And I wouldn't be surprised if Governor Lamanu is going to gift you with a case of tuna tonight at the dinner, because he wants you to get a taste of what that product is like for us, and we hold so much pride in that. In 2021, there was a decline in our exports, and again, it was because of the exports associated with canned tuna and the related products that come with it. The same went along with the private inventory investments. As long as the tuna exports drop, so does our private inventory investments. Personal consumption and government spending still went up, mainly because of the federal resources that we received throughout the pandemic. So it's important to note that American Samoa trading with other countries is a one-directional flow resulting in imports and without exports, meaning we have very little exporting going on here in the territory, and we depend so much on the tuna canning industry to be that primary export factor for American Samoa, while imports, it's a given that we are very much dependent on imports from off-island. So in addition to the economic impacts of our tuna industry here in American Samoa, there are other federal actions or laws and regulations that do impact our economic development efforts. We have to state that mainly because we feel like we're already tied down with so many other rules and regulations that if we add on this proposed sanctuary, that's another, rope that's going to be tied up against our hands for us to abide by. But some major regulations or federal laws that we just wanted to share with you is the federal minimum wage. Federal minimum wage is here in American Samoa does impact our tuna canning industry. I think the last minimum wage increase was done in 2021, and it had a significant increase to the local industry. We also wanted to mention the cabotage law, as mentioned yesterday by Deputy Attorney General Roy Hall. That plays a big role in our challenges with our economic development, mainly behind commercial transportation, air and sea. I also want to mention, and I think this is important because of our infrastructure development, is the Buy America Act, or now also known as Build America, Buy America Act, or the BABA. Just recently, there were some waivers granted because we had to share with the federal agencies that if you are expecting us to use all this money, the bill and the IRA to develop our infrastructure, yet the BABA requires us to buy made in America products only. But yet, because of our geographic location, we have to look at New Zealand, Southeast Asia, Australia, these places that we can afford to buy infrastructure materials so that we can build. And yet also at the same time, as a result of the pandemic, because of the supply chain issues, we are at the very bottom of that supply chain demand. By the time materials and everything gets to American Samoa, not only are they very high in cost, the labor is already high, and the chances of getting that project completed is going to be very lengthy because we have to wait for shipment, and we have to wait until one contractor completes one project before they can move over to the next infrastructure project that we have. So that's very significant to our economic development. Another federal law or regulation that kind of hinders our fast or growth as a local economy is the federal permitting process. Believe it or not, it is very lengthy. And I know you're all going through the NEPA process right now, so the EIS itself, I can't imagine how hectic that is. But imagine for a coastal community as ours, lately there's been a lot of king tides impacting our coastal roads. You've seen how very close we are to the water. Last year, when we had our king tides, there was one portion of the road that was completely flooded with ocean water, and that damaged people's cars, it held up traffic, and it ruined our main road. So what did we have to do? We had to go in and immediately fix the problem. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of chaos in our local community. And what did we get? We got fined, or we got tapped in the hand for, you didn't complete this federal permit because, you're right next to the coast. I said, we're here fighting for what makes sense for our people because it's an emergency response on our side. But yet, we're still told, no, you have to go the federal permitting process. So we asked, is there a way we can make this an emergency response type of process? Because even the environmental review process itself takes away time from the implementation part of a federal grant, project. So that's what we meant by, seawall projects. That is very common out here with the impacts of climate change and sea level rise in American Samoa. We can barely even get a seawall going or a road construction done because of the federal permits that come with it, okay? And also the challenge is leveraging our resources. We try to be creative as much as possible with not only our federal resources, but what we locally have. But we all know that every federal grant that comes to our jurisdictions comes with eligible versus ineligible costs. So there are certain things that we can do with the money we get versus things that we really can't do, or otherwise we may be asked to do federal matching. But most of the time, we can't even afford those federal matches. So yesterday, it was very interesting that everybody kept saying, oh, what do you have planned for economic diversification? I held back from making any comments yesterday because I wanted to wait until today to share that information, in a more coordinated fashion rather than spitting out pieces of information. We do have a plan in place to diversify our economy, but one thing is for sure, it's not an overnight job. It takes years for us to get new industries to be developed in our local territory, given our geographic location. We're not like the contiguous U.S. where you can just cross the state line to get a job in a different city or town. We're in the middle of the vast Pacific Ocean, so we have to be creative with what we have and what really makes sense for us here in the territory. One of the things that we do out of Department of Commerce right now, focusing on the tourism industry, there's a lot of work going on right now with trying to revive our cable car project. It's right up here on the tramway. It has a lot of history for American Samoa, so we want to bring that back. But in order for us to do that, we have to do feasibility studies, which also takes a lot of time. And in order for the grantor to give us more money to that, they have to see the results of that feasibility study. So again, these are some of the regulations and processes we have to go through in order to get to the end product that we really want. Recently, Department of Commerce also developed a downtown revitalization master plan. For our federal partners' information, the Whangatongo downtown area is in fact a historic area. It's where we had our naval stations, and there's a lot of history in the area. So recently we created a master plan that could help us propose or construct about 10 new economic development related projects in the area, not only to attract tourism, but also to uplift the space that we have over there. Honestly, being born and raised here in American Samoa, it's the same look I remember ever since I was a kid. So to me, it's our turn as our generation now, we can make that change by upgrading that space and making it more attractive to our guests and visitors. The Rainmaker Hotel, if you're staying at Sadie's by the Sea, that used to be an old wing or part of the Rainmaker Hotel. It was a very popular destination back in the 60s and 70s, I heard. I wasn't born at the time. But it's a prime location, and we hold so much pride in that location. We don't want to just give it to anybody to come and develop it. We want to have a well thought out plan so that when we're ready to develop that area, it's going to bring in so much economic opportunities, especially jobs for our local people. In addition to that, if you remember or have been through next to the stadium in Tafuna, the Veterans Stadium, there's been, a big open lot there next to the FAA, or part of that has already been returned to the American Samoa government. We are involved in plans to create a sports development complex in that area. If you remember, for our federal partners here, there's not a lot of flat land here in American Samoa. It's such a mountainous landscape. So we try to be creative with what we have in place so that we could insert these economic development opportunities. There's a lot of potential in sports tourism in our region compared to other national opportunities like FIFA. So there's ongoing discussions about having FIFA develop some of those lots in there. And then you probably heard about the technology and broadband industry. That is one industry that we are currently working to develop. It's already here because we already have the basic infrastructure, but we have so much bandwidth that we can't even use it all up. So why have all that unused bandwidth if you can't create more opportunities out of it? So we decided we're going to create an innovation and technology campus. We want to be the hub of the Pacific in the IT industry. The COVID pandemic really pushed American Samoa to do business online, even do online distance learning, even working remotely. That was a big shift in our local economy since the pandemic, and we thought, hey, it makes a lot of sense for us to invest more in that area, because as a matter of fact, even the federal government has a lot of resources in broadband that has been recently given out to all the states and territories, and that is to make internet affordable for every household across the United States and its territories. So far, over $150 million has been invested in the past decade here in American Samoa in our broadband or IT industry. The BEAD and the DE programs, we have approximately $50 million that's going to go into that industry. All this is a work in progress. We're not even done yet. We're just barely scraping the surface of that industry that we really would like to see be more developed in the future. Believe it or not, the Department of Commerce has a Super Aliyah program. This has been around for many years, and I want to credit former Director of Commerce, Keniseli Lafaele, for his efforts at the time to initiate this program. And we are very happy to share that before the end of the year, we should be seeing the first Super Aliyah arrive here in American Samoa. And that's one way we can help our local fisheries industry, be more innovative, but at the same time be very sustainable in the long run. Some of the discussions last night, it was mentioned that there needs to be a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities for our people. You probably don't know, but we only have one bank here, commercial bank here in the territory, and that's one of the challenges we're going through right now. But that doesn't mean we are going to be stuck in that challenge. There are other federal resources that we are currently awaiting on to help our local businesses, and that is through more access to capital through what's called the Small State and Business Credit Initiative. That's intended to be a $57 million investment or program that we're going to roll out very, very soon as U.S. Treasury gives us the approval for that. So that's just a gist of what do we have planned in case, things don't go as planned for our other industries, because we have to look forward what else we can do for our people. But it's important to note that all we're asking for is patience, not only on the local side, but also on the federal side. We don't want to rush into something that could really impact people's lives, AKA the people of American Samoa. We may be small in number and population, but our lives matter. What's the use of trying to do a lot of conservation and a lot of lives are going to be negatively impacted by it? So we all look forward to a completed economic impact study by our federal partners, and all we're asking for is to keep us in mind, involve us in the process, ask us questions, let us give you some of the raw data sources that we have access to that you can use to complete your study. Transparency is very important to us, and we would appreciate that from our federal partners during this scoping process. We also want to make sure that we keep our community informed. Believe it or not, American Samoa is a family-oriented Christian community, but you don't want to catch them on the wrong side, right? So even us as government agencies, we are held accountable by our own people to report back to them and to ensure they understand what is going on. I think that is very important to know. Also, we want to make sure that we are prepared to have a strategy to address whatever negative outcomes, will be revealed through these studies. So we really want to make sure you understand that concern from our side as an economic development agency. But make no mistake, our firm answer is going to be a big no if the outcome really has an impact or a negative impact to our competitive advantage with StarKist or with our fisheries industry. We are very serious about it. We are very protective of it. Why? Because there's a lot of lives involved. Yes, 2,600 individuals work at StarKist, but don't forget they have children, they have extended families that they have to take care of. So the number of people that are going to be impacted is exponential. It could be double or triple the number of lives that's going to be impacted if people go without jobs, if anything happens to our tuna industry here in American Samoa. So oftentimes, I'm glad, I think Jeremy mentioned it in his presentation, that there is something or a law or regulation that references to economic, environmental justice and equity, and there was a mention of underserved communities or populations. I can honestly share with you, because after decades of experience with federal grants management, oftentimes American Samoa is unserved. Okay? We are unserved and underserved at the same time. I promise myself I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry, nor am I going to sing a song. I don't want to do that. But we are going to do one activity to keep everybody awake to finish our presentation, and that is we're going to read an excerpt from our deed of sessions. I think it's important, and I think the message needs to be ingrained in everybody's minds, both federal and local. So let's read together, if you can read it or see it from afar. It says, Whereas for the promotion of the peace and welfare of the people of said islands, for the establishment of a good and sound government, and for the preservation of the rights and property of the inhabitants of said islands, the chiefs, rulers, and people thereof are desirous of granting unto the said government of the United States full power and authority to enact proper legislation for and to control the said islands, and are further desirous of removing all disabilities that may be existing in connection therewith, and to ratify and to confirm the grant of the rule of said islands heretofore granted on the 2nd day of April. That is just a small piece of information that we really wanted to pull from our deeds of cession, because it's a commitment made by our forefathers and the U.S. government that American Samoa's interests will always be protected by the U.S. Dr. Dan Anga can elaborate on this since he's the expert there, but I thought this is a very important piece of information that needs to be heard in the room today. Not only, like I mentioned, not only do we feel underserved, but also unserved by certain federal laws and regulations that may not have been thought of to be harmful to anybody in particular, but you've heard our concerns and our fears about why a proposed sanctuary in the Prias can possibly lead to an immediate economic downturn for American Samoa. It takes time to introduce new major industries in a geographic isolated place like American Samoa, but we are very adamant about protecting our fisheries industry because it has been the longest and most impactful industry on island. We hold it very close to our hearts because it's part of our history and our identity as a small community that's comparable to a small rural town in the contiguous U.S. that's surrounded by the vast Pacific Ocean. Lives are at stake, and the economic future of American Samoa is in the hands or decision-making of others. DOC's mission also reminds us that we need to continue improving the quality of life of the people in American Samoa. If collaboration and partnership is highly encouraged in this process, we ask you to please seek our input through raw data sources and whatever information you need from us. Please don't ignore our voices and our concerns, and please don't let a proposed sanctuary contribute to an already burdened industry we cannot afford to lose at this time.
Thank you so much. I know our partner from StarKiss is double booked, so I'm going to have you come on up and then we'll take questions after the end.
I think Betsy and Mike took my presentation, so that's it for us, right? But she did mention, the governor did clean fish last week at StarKiss, so I hope he does present you with the product he made. He was surprisingly a really fast fish cleaner. He was there, he did 3 full totes of fish. That was like 50 cases. And he said, La, do I get paid? I said, no, we bought you breakfast, so we're good. O te tūla'i atu I le awa ma le whaalolo tele e whaimasui le StarKiss I le nei au fia mamalu. Ai mua o te whaatulo atu I le mamalu o le whainga malo, tutuila mamanua I lona tapatolu tulo. O paia o malo mai whafo ma sa mo poto o te whaatulo atu. O le a tamawhai loa le wholasanga le StarKiss I le ngangana Peritania. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. My name is La Puasa. I'm here representing StarKiss and the more than 2,300 workers from more than 10 different nationalities and ethnic groups at the StarKiss Samoa plant. This year marks StarKiss' 60th anniversary in American Samoa, and we proudly stand as the largest private sector employer in American Samoa, contributing to more than 25% of all jobs on the island. The ability of StarKiss to operate in the waters surrounding American Samoa is very vital for the economic stability, sustainability of the island, as our fishing operations account for a third of the island's GDP. Moreover, our business activities play a crucial role in connecting the small island community with the global economy. More than 90% of the shipping containers departing from the port of Pago Pago are associated with our operations, and more than 70% of American Samoa exports consist of StarKist products. For the last 5 years, more than 80% of the fish supplied to StarKist Samoa is from the U.S. fishing vessels. The catches from the U.S. fishing fleets allow us to produce for the U.S. school lunch program and the Department of Defense's ready-to-eat meals, or MRE, for the U.S. military. Only 12 remaining U.S. fishing vessels supply fish to the cannery, down from 40 vessels. Regrettably, the proposed expansion of the Pacific Remote Islands Marine National Monument would force the fleet that supplies us with fish to spend more time in international waters, resulting in increased costs. Such escalated financial burdens could jeopardize the economic stability of the American Samoa and leading to direct job loss of more than 2,300 and countless private sector jobs that rely on the cannery. It would inflict significant financial harm at a time when American Samoa fisheries in the Western Pacific are already dealing with numerous barriers. With over 50% of the U.S. EEZ in the Western Pacific region already designated as Marine National Monument waters, further expansion of national marine sanctuaries in this region would only exacerbate the problems currently impeding American Samoa's fishing fleet. American fishing fleets already face unfair competition in the Western Pacific due to the presence of a highly subsidized Chinese fishing fleet, which has substantially grown over the past 2 decades. Harvestable waters in the American EEZ provide a respite from this unfair competition, as Chinese vessels are unable to fish in these waters. However, closing off harvestable waters in the EEZ through the proposed expansion forces American vessels to increasingly compete alongside these subsidized Chinese vessels. Diminishing the relevance of U.S. fisheries in the Pacific not only weakens their position, but also diminishes the political capital of the U.S. to advance conservation and management measures. While the goal of the monument expansion is to conserve natural resources, these actions could inadvertently exacerbate existing illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing activities in other fisheries. In the past 2 public hearings held in American Samoa on this proposal, I, along with some of our workers, attended these hearings. If you did not see a cannery worker reference on those 57,000 comments that were submitted online, it's because throughout this fairly quick process, we've had to have smaller sessions with our workers to explain what all this means. The majority of our workers do not have computers. Everything had to be translated. So, stepping off as a StarKist, but as a personal level, speaking as a worker, I am a 2nd generation tuna industry worker or cannery worker. I am a daughter of a fish cleaner. My mother worked in the industry for 25 years, put us 7 kids through school when the minimum wage was around $2 an hour. Samoa Packing, the other cannery that left, helped send me to school. StarKist is helping with my graduate studies. This is nothing compared to half of my coworkers who are 3rd, 4th generation tuna workers, born into the industry, raised their families through the industry, kick-started a small business in the industry, and survived from this industry. It's all they know. I say about the fortunate opportunity that I was able to go to school, because should something happen, this is all they know, the tuna industry. Starkist is the only plant that satisfies the Made in America requirements for government contracts, and there have been efforts to our competitors to degrade this. Let me talk a little bit about the USDA and the MRE, which is something we're very proud of to see that flag on the tuna. Nearly half of the workers have a son, a daughter serving in the military, a father, a mother. My son is serving in the U.S. military in New York in Fort Drum. So because I work at Starkist, he expects a tuna care package every month. Next thing you know, I'm feeding one person and then I'm feeding a whole unit. But I see that can and I see that flag, and I'm proud to be sharing it with the American people, and I'm proud to provide it for my son and his unit. The tuna industry is like this paleo here. It's like a foundation. Everyone building on the community here in American Samoa. And once that collapses, everything collapses. So when we talk about special places, consider us special. Consider our community special. Until such time we can diversify the economy so we could supplant the tuna industry, supplement the tuna industry. The tuna industry is all we've got. And if you take that away, you're literally killing us. So please consider us special too. Thank you.
You have to go? All right. Thank you. Our partner has to leave. She stayed far after she was expected back.
Can I just ask a real clarifying question before she leaves? I know she's going to run. But when you say USDA and MRE, are you talking about the school lunch product that's sent to the U.S. and the military contracts? I think that should be clarified.
That's correct. Yes, we supply the school lunch program and the military MRE, and those are made from catches only from U.S. fishing vessels. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, so we have time for a few questions, comments back. Okay.
Thank you. I'm Salote, and I'm from the Department of Youth and Women's Affairs. And I just want to say thank you for all the information that was shared. Job well done. Last night I was able to share some of the information that we were discussing yesterday with some of the women. And so I am here to speak on their behalf, to make sure that their voices are heard. And one of the things that they had asked me, because we don't have much data to share, so they said, then remind them. Remind the people of our story. Remind them of the white dresses that the many mothers had to wear with the white boots. That was the uniform for the cannery workers. They would get on the bus, and at that time it was probably $0.25, and I think now it's about $2. They would all pack up into the bus and they would make their way to the cannery, and they would stand in the assembly line for hours, and they would clean the fish. So the mothers asked me to remind you of that time. They didn't do it just because they needed a job. They did it because they wanted to live. They wanted to live, and they wanted to make sure that they provided for their children. And after those hours of standing, they would catch the bus, go home, wake up their children, make food, prepare them for school, and help their husband go to work. That was their daily life. So I am here to remind all of us, I am a product of the canneries. 60 years We are all raised by a village, and the village kept the canneries going. So I wanted to share that. I also wanted to share with our friends who came, our federal friends, there's something that we say a lot when we're challenged, and you hear that often. You probably didn't understand it, because "Malo lavalo ngosai." When challenges are being, you're faced with challenges, we say that. We say, thank you, be patient. Be patient. So we are thankful for your patience. We're thank you for allowing us to, for you being a listening ear and also a shoulder to cry on. We want to say thank you for that. And to my cousins from Hawaii, Honolulu, and Hawaii, because I think we have somebody from here, I want you to know that this proposal, you do have ties, historical ties to this area. And I know it was many years ago, but I want to share my condolences and respect to the Ohana of Hui Panala'au. That's historical. We have not forgotten their sacrifice in making sure that the U.S. territory claims. We acknowledge their sacrifice, and this is why many of us are allowed to use those waters. American Samoa also has genealogy ties to this, and this is where it's important, where it says we want to make sure that we are culturally connected. We mentioned about sanctuary. The ocean is our sanctuary. So please, it's not just a spot, it's the whole ocean altogether. And as I was reading on this proposal, it says in Hawaiian, "Iola kanaloa, iola kako nei." The ocean's health is our collective health. And this is also the collective health of the people of the Pacific Islands, and especially here in American Samoa. I just wanted to say thank you for allowing the women to have a voice and a seat at the table, and we're grateful for the respect for gender equality, and I'm so thankful that our governor and our lieutenant governor are so adamant about making sure that each one of us has a seat at the table so that you will know how we feel and we live. So, whawhitai te le lava, ma le malo lava le onsai. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So we have some more questions. There's a mic right behind you there.
I want to say pardon to all the distinguished members of this conference. In the Samoan culture, we've been talking about culture, like I said this morning. It was heart-wrenching listening to our government leaders, traditional leaders, having to explain what our culture is. When American Samoa is different from any other territory in that they have the constitutional right to the protection of their land and culture, as we saw in the clip that we saw. And here we are looking at, because once that steamroller starts, we don't know where it's going to end. But this morning, I want to speak. My name is Sue Alexander Jennings. I am the delegate for Swains Island and also the traditional leader for the Swains Island Tokelau community. And in the Samoan culture, that's why they're very cautious when you present them to an audience, not to forget anybody. Because if you're not recognized, either you're not welcome or you don't belong here. That's the culture. This is not about just Tutuila and Manua. I need the federal government, which I got to say, anytime that we have The only time Swains Island is of any I forgot the word. See, I speak 3 languages. Is recognized is when I address a federal agency. And let me tell you why. Because they recognize Swains Island. The State Department of Foreign Affairs Manual says that the outlying possessions of the United States include Swains Island, American Samoa, and Swains Island. I thought, well, that's the same thing. But if you look further down in that rule, it says American Samoa in 1900, Swains Island in 1925. There's definitely 2 different territories we're talking about. Swains Island is a territory of the United States, number 1. I think my presence here is also important. Thank you for all the presenters. All the slides we saw in there shows that Swains Island has a significant part in this EEZ. Swains Island is 200 miles north of American Samoa. Then you got to go another 200 miles for international water. That's 400 miles. You square that off, what does that come out to? That's hundreds of thousands of square miles that still contributes to the canneries today. So in our beginning, we started with the copra. Swains Island has been an economic asset to this territory since the beginning when we came in 1925. And we're still working on some details of that. There's a whole much I can say about it, but here's what I got to say. I'd be remiss if I did not have the opportunity to tell you about my experience with the National Marine Sanctuary. We can talk about a lot of things. But I tell you, the sanctuary has been very, very important for Swains Island. At a time where Swains Island was threatened with national security, Swains Island the sanctuary came to my help. In 2006, the Tokelau government did a referendum calling on New Zealand to take back Swains Island to the Tokelaus. I called the State Department and I said, what's going on here? 2008, they tried the same thing. Because of a treaty that was signed between the United States and New Zealand back in the 80s. In that treaty, the United States agreed to relinquish back in the Guano Act. Swains was first a territory in 1856 under the Guano. If you Google the Guano, it lists all these islands that were included under the Guano Act. Swains Island is one of them. And if you look at the agreement between the United States and New Zealand, the United States went through extreme measures to keep Swains Island. They relinquished claims to all these other islands in order for New Zealand to agree to release any claims on Swains Island. So just a little history there, okay? So, but anyway, the National Marine Sanctuary did so much for me, personally, for the island of Swains. First, they started out with Jean-Michel Cousteau. That started taking the message out to the world about Swains. Then they did archaeological research and uncovered the secrets of Swains Island. Then they helped us with the Hukulea, the big event, brought it to Swains. Then they did a research on the Fautasi. All right? I'm almost trying to justify my ability to present to you. But I'm saying the reason why, because at that time, Dan Basta and I, they recognized the rights of the people of American Samoa. Thank you to the forefathers. And also for American Samoa for accepting Swains Island, because when Swains Island came in, a new term was conceived. It's called a Native American Samoan, which includes the lineal descendants of Tutuila, Manua, and Swains Island. And guess what? Automatically, by the Constitution of American Samoa, Swains Island had the right to the protection of its land and its culture. Okay, so we got the same benefit thing. And in this thing, I'm saying that the sanctuary has been a big help. One of the most important things that I think came from the sanctuary is I am on the Sanctuary Advisory Board, even though we only manage 3 miles of Swains Island. And I tell you, I've tried to present before, but I'm asking whoever it is to please include Swains Island as a representative in whatever council, wherever we go with this. Swains Island needs to have a voice in there because we represent 1/3 of this, but we have no access to it. But I stand with the government and the leaders of American Samoa to please give special consideration for American Samoa, only because we have the constitutional right to protect our land and our culture before you make a final decision like this. Don't forget Swains Island. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing that. Will not forget.
Kula ia kumale whaalualu, whiwa kule, e whionga senkoi, ko whioli, whionga ia alu, ne fo e whiwa kule whionga ko vangalukenga. Maulunga e ngā ose ele ele. I would be remiss if I would not take this opportunity. I mentioned it last night at our little group. I kept hearing the procedures and the decisions. We're coming here to gather your opinions, and we'll take it, and we'll make a decision back in DC. This is, I said it yesterday, you will never find another place per capita that is as patriotic as American Samoa. You've heard other U.S. territories protest against the United States. You will never hear that here in American Samoa. And as I stand here today, listening to your procedures, who have written them? Who wrote them? It's all of you bureaucrats up in Washington, D.C. who are going to make the decision. You said that you're going to take it back to D.C. What an insult. What an insult. Not only for our paramount chiefs, not only for our government leaders, at a minimum, my brothers and sisters that are standing guard downrange, defending your freedom and my freedom to assemble here today. Anything less than the wish of our people. Our governor has spoken, our paramount chief has spoken, our leaders have spoken. Anything less than that, I am telling you, it is not right. We did not serve the greatest military in the United States to come back to this. As I stand here on behalf of thousands and thousands of my brothers and sisters across the world, standing in for the red, white, and blue, standing in for that flag, I am telling you, anything short of the voice of our governor, our leaders, is not right. Having said that, I said it yesterday too. People in Washington, D.C. is not well known for making the right decision for cases like this. You've heard us talk about this last couple of days. If there's any group that understands the Pacific, it's us. Because our ancestors have traveled the Pacific. Our ancestors were missionaries from here all the way to New Guinea. ancestors were taken to Micronesia. We've spanned the whole Pacific. We understand the Pacific. So, what am I saying? Please, have some respect for the people of American Samoa. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to recognize the panel. Were there any questions for the panel? Any clarifications or anything? No? If not, thank you so much for being with us today. No? Was there a question in the back? No? Okay. There was a question in the back.
Trying to get his mic on.
Just check. Yeah. Oje tula imal farolo. Tau tala foi male fai tete. Oje fa tulu wa tule. Pa io la fia nei taiao nei tula leso. Pa ia fa malo. Pa ia fa le atunu. Ma pa ia tala li. I just want to comment, and I've been into like 3 of these sessions, 4 of these sessions. Badge number 23279, as a former employee of Starkist for almost 20 years. I served there as a safety officer, a security guard, a forklift operator, a logistics supervisor, a warehouse manager, and also HR. I put all my kids through school working at the cannery. And the impact as transitioning over from Starkist to the government, I noticed how much the government and the people of American Samoa really need Starkist to operate. As they move 500 metric tons of fish every day, 900 containers a month. We provide canned tuna, fish oil, and fish meal, not only to the United States. I was there since the Heinz owned it, then Del Monte owned it, and now Dong Wong owns it. I stand behind the leaders of this little country of ours, or this little territory. And I remember putting care packages for my brothers who served in Iraq. Now my kids serve the military. And one time my daughter wrote an essay in elementary, and she said, because the teacher asked her, what do you want to be when you grow up? She wrote, I want to work at Starkist. And the teacher laughed. The teacher actually laughed at her. And she said to my daughter, why? And my daughter said, because my dad works over there. Just like all the other speakers today, this is a threat towards Starkist, and this is a threat towards our livelihoods on this island. And 3 went off. Check, sorry. I guess I'm talking. Check. But like I said, I stand behind the leaders of this country of ours, this territory of ours. And we're asking, please, don't take it away. Don't take this. Don't threaten Starkist. Because everything rides on this, just like when DOC spoke, and just like when the oil spoke. The numbers don't lie, they're declining. So we need you to help improve or help us until we find that new platform we can stand on. But that's what I stand before you today. Pamon moli. Okay, olo maawa kwa. What do we need? Do you need us to all fly up to DC? Huh? Do you? Because we can. Whose door do we need to knock on to make that decision? Because we will. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. I'm going to ask our panel if you'd like to be more comfortable here. Yesterday on the agenda, we had reserved a space for the representative from the FONA who was not able to make it. There's a letter from the Senate that Tautasi will read on their behalf.
Thank you, Anu. Some great presentations this afternoon. So I have a letter. First of all, I apologize for representative from the FONO not being here today. The FONO is represented by 2 staff members, but as you are well aware, or maybe not aware, that the FONO is currently in session and they're still deliberating over the next year's fiscal budget. But I do understand that they are working on a joint resolution that will be submitted, and hopefully we can submit that online via email to ONMS. But I do have a letter that the President of the Senate asked that be read today. It's a letter that was addressed to the President in June pertaining to this issue. Dear President Biden, this letter is written in the hopes that you will hear the pleas of the American Samoa people. It is my understanding that you have received letters from our Honorable Governor Lemanu Peletimonga, as well as from Honorable Congresswoman Mua Mata Radawagan regarding this issue. Both have passionately opposed the expansion of the Pacific Remote Islands Marine National Monument for many legitimate reasons, such as its massive detrimental effects on our fishing industry and the negative repercussions on our already delicate economy. I am sure you already understand that we in the South Pacific suffer directly from climate change at a faster rate than any other areas of the world, and it has compelled us to further prioritize our natural resources. I am positive you understand all negative consequences to our lands and oceans and have a direct negative impact seeking to destroy the culture we love dearly and fight every day to sustain. American Samoa's 120-year history with the United States and our strategic security, military, and political position in the South Pacific needs no reiteration. I know you are very aware of our individual contributions and sacrifices for the United States through serving in all facets of its military services. We love the United States and desire to nurture our relationship, a relationship that connotes two parties who are willing to discuss mutually beneficial avenues to resolve issues. Respectfully, we ask for the opportunity to engage in a dialogue regarding the expansion of the Pacific Remote Island Marine National Monument before decisions are made that will have negative, irreversible consequences for our home. We humbly ask for the opportunity to be heard and to share with you our reasons for opposing this expansion. And we ask for the opportunity, we ask for the opportunity to see if we can come to a resolution that will benefit all parties in the South Pacific. We are asking you to honor our history of working together, our history of mutual respect, and allow us to come to the table to discuss these serious matters. Respectfully, To'aolo Manaya Fruin, Senate President. And I do want to say that that letter was sent to the President on June 9th after the comment period had closed for the scoping. But I have been asked to read this onto the record today, and hopefully, John, you folks can accept the FONA resolution once it is finalized. So, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Pastor. We're at the closing. Would you mind introducing the Lieutenant Governor? All right, so we are really coming to the end of our workshop. We'll be having some closing statements from our co-hosts. And so to introduce the American Samoa government, we'll have Tautasi introduce our Lieutenant Governor.
Ia ile ava tauai o te palawatu mo whaalualo lo whionga Lieutenant Governor. Whionga talawenga ale ia mo lau saunoanga mulmuli o lewa tātou tau nuu mai le si ui o le tātou polokalama. Pe ona silisila le tātou agenda lo yeila manoa e whaiei saunoanga whalai au ia e meise closing remarks mai le tātou whainga malo e meise ia Amerika Samoa. A mai ona saunoa le whionga Lieutenant Governor ia na mo lele manoa mātou te toe watuini whamtalang pupu lama mau mato whai atua tasi ia whaamuta tātou whuntanga. Please welcome Lieutenant Governor Taluanga Ale for his final statements from American Samoa.
Thank you, Tautasi. O te tula I le avatele mal whaloalo, whai masui o le whionga I le Kovansili, ia mal whainga malo Amerika Samoa. Whai atu sina whamtalanga wale nei Alfia. It is with great pleasure that I offer a few closing remarks as we come to an end of this fascinating two-day workshop, PRIA National Marine Sanctuary workshop. I want to thank you and extend the whaftaitele to our federal partners, NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries Director John Armour, and the entire NOAA staff for being here in American Samoa to help us deliberate and share about this important issue. I'd also like to thank DMWR Director Tautasi and everyone at ASG for coordinating this event and ensuring that we had the opportunity to conduct a meaningful conversation. My hope is that we all leave this workshop with a better understanding of the potential effects of this designation. My hope for American Samoa is that we have effectively demonstrated the consequences of further restricting commercial fishing in the PRIA region, not just to our economy, but also to our culture. My hope for our federal partners is that you go away with a better understanding of our concerns and our willingness to work with you to help us protect our economy and our Samoa. To those of you who have traveled far to be here, thank you. Thank you for making the long trek to experience in person what it is like to live on a small island in the middle of the Pacific. The importance of the tuna industry to American Samoa and our local economy cannot be overstated. It is a major pillar of our economy. It is the employer of thousands, and it is what feeds our families. Any action that threatens the survival of the fishing industry threatens the survival of our fragile economy and threatens our ability to live on this island. We understand and appreciate the conservation efforts being made in the Pacific. Our natural marine resources remain one of our most valuable assets, and we have ensured that fishing in this area remains sustainable. I am confident that we can find a solution that will preserve our oceans without crippling our fishing industry, our economy, and our culture. In addition to public comments we submitted in June, the American Samoa government is also submitting a letter summarizing what was discussed during these last 2 days, affirming our opposition to any further restrictions on commercial fishing in the PRIA region. We appreciate your consideration of our comments. I want to make absolutely clear to our federal partners that we in American Samoa are proud to be part of the American family. We are Americans, just like you from California, DC, Delaware, Hawaii are Americans. We too are Americans, and we have a right, just like you in all the other states, to fight for your rights to preserve what you have in your backyards, and that is what we are doing here today, and we thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity to share those thoughts and explain to you our feelings about this place. American Samoa is a gem. It's a special place. It has a vibrant culture, which if you haven't seen yet, I hope that you get to experience before you leave. And I think it's something worth preserving. It's something worth preserving for the United States, for the American family to be proud of, to have these indigenous cultures that live side by side with our vast and complex American family. It's a good thing for America to have American Samoa thrive and be able to serve its own needs. In the end, this will come down to a matter of equation. As I tried to demonstrate yesterday, on the one side you have the call for a sanctuary to preserve, save the environment, and on the other side you have us here in American Samoa who want to use the resources in the environment to preserve our economy and to preserve our culture and our ability to live on this island. Is there a world where these two things could live side by side? I think so. I think we can preserve the environment, establish the sanctuary, and allow commercial fishing so that the tuna industry can continue to thrive here in American Samoa, and our people can continue to live here instead of all of us coming to Hawaii and California and all these other places. And then you can also come here and visit if you want to have a vacation after the long winters in DC or Minnesota. So I think there's a happy medium in there, and we got to find it. And that's why I'm glad that you folks are here to explore. And the only possibility, the only reason why we won't be able to do this is because the calculus has determined that the right side of the equation is simply not good enough. It's simply not worth it, right? That's the only way this goes sideways, is because the powers that be decide that preserving a culture, preserving the economy and the tuna industry in American Samoa is just not worth it. Saving the environment for, whatever reason, is more important. So we hope that when you go back to DC and talk to the powers that be, you explain to them that there's a way where the environmentalists and us here in American Samoa can both get what we want, and we can all raise everybody up instead of an equation where one side gets everything and the other side doesn't. So with that, I wish you all the best. For those of you who are leaving tomorrow, safe travels, and hope that you return home safely to your families and friends. For those of you who will be spending the weekend with us, I invite you to enjoy and take part, being part of our community, and learn more about American Samoa. Ya o se famtalang pupule na fai masuyo le fionga kovan sili ya lofa le tua ia famanuia tuengo ne aso ilona lofa malonanga le soifua.
Thank you so much. Director Armour was introduced yesterday, so I'll forego that formal introduction, but final statements from our partners at NOAA, please.
Talofa. Thank you for that, Lieutenant Governor. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. I also want to thank Governor Leimanu as well, and the American Samoa government for your leadership, for co-hosting this with us, and for bringing together all these great people for these great conversations that we've had over the last 48 hours or so. I can tell you personally it's had a big impact on me. And I think I speak for all of the NOAA team, as well as other federal family, that it has had a big impact on us all. Thank you. I also want to thank Director Tautasi. Everybody's disappearing on me. Director Tautasi, I really wanted to, it's been great to get to know you these last couple of days. I've really appreciated your advice and your guidance, as well as your help and your support for this workshop. So this is, I really, really appreciate that. Superintendent Tuatasi, I want to thank you and the team from National Marine Sanctuary of American Samoa. You guys have done just a phenomenal job pulling off this workshop in incredible, circumstances and just an incredible amount of work and effort. And you did a fantastic job. Really, really appreciate that. So thank you so much. To the rest of the NOAA team as well, including folks from Office of National Marine Sanctuaries, including from the folks at National Marine Fisheries Service. Again, we pulled about 20 plus people from around the country, not including the folks that are already here with the National Marine Sanctuary for American Samoa, to come down and have these conversations. People from Honolulu, people from Washington, D.C., like myself. And it was, again, I think everybody that was here has been changed. And has really been better for the conversations that we've had. And I want to thank all of you as well. I know that everybody that's attended this workshop over the last couple of days has taken time out of their day to be with their families, to do their jobs, to come and have these really productive conversations with us that are both from the heart as well as providing the data that we really needed to have this conversation. So thank you for all of that, really on behalf of everybody at NOAA. Just a little bit more personally, I'll just say, in March, as has been said, and Brady did a really good job of articulating this timeline yesterday, the President of the United States gave us this mandate. And I think I speak for everybody in NOAA that we were all a little bit surprised. It wasn't on my to-do list when the year started, if I'm honest. I know Sarah, and Charles, right? The other leaderships in NOAA, it was not something that we anticipated. It wasn't something that that we had on our list of things to do. But I will say that. If nothing else, I think we are glad to have had this conversation for so many, many reasons. It was just a phenomenal moment for us to come down and have this deep conversation. The President didn't tell us necessarily how to do, and as I said yesterday, it didn't direct us that we had to end up with a sanctuary, just that we had to consider it and go through this process. So but I will tell you that having these conversations as part of the process, I think we're all better for it. At least I can tell that from myself. We learned so much from the conversations, and as the Lieutenant Governor said, we are going to take that information, everything that we did, and we're going to do our best to balance that equation, the left and the right side, and we are going to do our best. So Sarah and Charles and I got together, and I'm going to invite them also to sort of correct anything that I might get wrong. But we tried to summarize as best we could, what did we hear, right? We came here, I stood up here yesterday to say we're here to listen, we're here to learn. So what did you listen? What did you hear? What did you learn? A lot. And I'm going to do my best to sort of provide sort of the high level things that we learned, but I'm not going to be able to list everything that we heard, but we do have this, this was recorded, we have all this in the record. So I want just because I may not say it, doesn't mean we didn't hear it. But I just want to hear you, I want you to hear me say, on behalf of NOAA, that these are sort of the 6 things that we heard. The cannery is extremely important to the American Samoan economy, and in so many ways, many, many, many ways. We heard that. We also heard that the cannery relies heavily on migratory tuna that are caught in the proposed National Marine Sanctuary. We heard that as well. We also heard that additional regulatory restrictions, including possibly from the National Marine Sanctuary, but other things as well that are happening, could contribute to the closing of the cannery. We also heard that the uncertainty of the Western Central Pacific Fishery Commission negotiations on quotas is causing a lot of concerns. And we also heard that there is a desire, and I think we just heard it very loud and very clear from Lieutenant Governor, that there is a desire for finding these win-wins, and that it's sort of a false choice to choose between conservation and economic well-being. I believe, and I think NOAA has demonstrated time and time again, there are opportunities for that. So those are the things that we've heard. And I just wanted to say also that I'm extremely proud of what the National Marine Sanctuary system around the country has done, especially right here in American Samoa with the National Marine Sanctuary of American Samoa, especially over the last decade. We heard Alex Jennings talk a little bit about that, at least from the Swains Island perspective. But I think about the role that we've had in communities around the country, like American Samoa, in educating our youth, in resource protection, in research and monitoring, and in infrastructure. National Marine Sanctuaries are not there's so much more than just about fishing. There's so much more that they can contribute to communities. They can contribute to both conservation and community well-being, and I am very, very confident that of that. I think we've demonstrated that over 50 years, 10 years right here in American Samoa, and I think we'll be able to continue doing that. And I think, regardless of what happens with the Pacific Remote Islands National Marine Sanctuary, the National Marine Sanctuary of American Samoa is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. These folks aren't going anywhere. And so we're going to be engaged in and supportive of this community for years to come, no matter what happens. So I wanted you to hear me say that as well in closing. I just wanted to also just say that I love this place. Unfortunately, this is a quick trip for me. I have to head back on the flight tomorrow to meet with some of our tribal partners in the Pacific Northwest, but I will be back. Many folks are going to be staying throughout the weekend to learn, to continue learning and listening to the community. So I think with that, fa'afetai.
All right, thank you so much. We will have our acting co-chairs really close us out. On the agenda, I'm supposed to talk for another hour. You don't want me to do that. So I'll hand it over to Atuatasi.
How about a big applause for the facilitator, Anu, for a wonderful job. Anu, great job. Elei tunoa le whaiwale nu. Elei whalala fuafoi la au le vao. E mā fua ono le matangi. Whapena le nei aso e maio o tupu mo tamali puno le mamalu o le whainga malo tuila monua. Le whio mai le whionga lukiang kovanga. O le paia lava ngā le whainga malo. Foi e whio mai le whionga senkoa, whionga kofia i halo, malu lavlea le whio kofia, au mo le malu o le whio kofia mo kua mo soli, kalainga lako wha ma le malu le ku au. E se foi lingai ku lao le aso. Le ngonga le o kia o le loko. A koe ba ngaku i le whukio mawai. Io kako kua au ka kia mai ke sa. E lei whaingo fia le asa lea. Au le ngai aso ma le kako whakasinga. Ma lolong sai. Whawhikai le kapo inga maulunga kuila mua. Le ua kako o mai le si ui o le ngai wha moe moe. E ka kongu le nganga. So se whaiva lava le kapo ia, e le manguia. O lea fo i se au nganga ma se kamwhainga. Nga ia ko file mu fuafuanga ma le kamwhainga. O le whawhkai le kua le uma. Le ua kako wo mai le kako le koe aso ngai moa. Kako ku le kua le wha moe o le malo. O le whenga malo kuila mamua. E wha malulu a foi. A wha peo i eise se wha makalanga o vale le longa mali e foi le whafoanga kuila mamua. Malu e awe whalele a kou whafonga. O le nganga lava ia. O lima mawai kou kuai whia ngalo kuila mamua. As we come to the closing of this gathering, I know every good thing must come to an end. There's a lot to be learned. There's a lot to be said about the last couple of days. But if there's any two takeaway lessons for me personally, and I also can speak on behalf of the federal government. Number one, it is clearly receive the position of the American Samoa government. Their position is not to be interpreted. Their position was loudly received by the federal government. You heard John Armour's closing remarks acknowledging the support, and we also came here to listen and to learn, and that's what we did. I think we walk away with that message loud and clear. And secondly, if there's anything that I'm really glad, because a lot of us have put in a lot of time and commitment to make sure that this workshop is co-hosted by the American Samoa government. To me, that alone is a testament of the federal government willing to listen and to work closely so that we can execute action with the consideration of the American Samoa people. So to me, that I think this is one of the very first time that, at least from the federal side, that we work very hard instead of having us hosting the meeting by ourselves and invited the local community to come. This is the first time we've changed that. And I have to thank John Armour and Christina Kekaweva, the director of the Office of National Marine Sanctuary in the Pacific region, for their belief and trust in us to make sure that the federal government is also on board in terms of the co-hosting this event. So I think moving forward, this is something that I think is the way to engage, to have a meaningful engagement of the community, so they have a say not only to the process, but also to the outcome. So, and we can't do this alone without our partners here in American Samoa. So I want to thank all of you for your patience and commitment and dedication, because I don't think we can validate this without the input and the contribution from our local partners. I know there's a lot more work to do. I know that we have a responsibility to make sure that all the comments and suggestions that we heard, that we'll take those under advisement. And we also have a directive, as here in American Samoa as well. We have a responsibility to formulate and come back with a draft and have another opportunity for our local community to react and again provide more recommendations. So with that note, again, I want to thank all of you, and I also want to thank my co-chair for his patience and his also commitment for the success of this workshop. I don't think this will not be possible without the the concurrence and the support from our local partner. So, RJ, I know I asked Tapa'au for closing prayer. So, Tapa'au, after Tautasi, then we'll ask you to please close our meeting.
Ua whamalo whaftai le whetalenga mau lo tō whā tō tasi, whai lo whonga, whai whonga tau mamoli fōi o le malo tele, wanga le noa, ia meise le ofisa le National Marine Sanctuaries, ia tau moli mai le tō whā, ia meise le whinangalo fōi o le whainga paanga matutuila mamanua, o te Taofi lele o tātou tau nuu malisi ui o tātou polokalama. Ma ua mai a whai on sau noa le fionga le Lieutenant Kovana e leise leo e toi whasili. Au te taofi e fo i le nei aso. Ia, upua e whai e whale o polu whai mai e le tū noa whai wa sa mea. E le tū lolo fua fo i a ulu la au e alau na ma fua o na tū lolo ona wahangi na matangi. O le whatala ula atu o le fionga al Kovana, i le paia man mamalu o tutuila mamnua, ma Swains, e whapena ma le whainga paanga ma le ofisa o le National Marine Sanctuaries ma le noa ua mafua i o na tātou potopoto i aso e lua o tuana i atu. O umauna fofola whala lo tātou wā, ma saunoa ma whetalaia fo i lo tātou aso, e ala saunoanga le fionga le Kovana, e meise fo i a saunoanga whai o le aso le fionga le Lieutenant Kovana. On behalf, Lieutenant Governor has spoken on behalf of the government and people of American Samoa, but I just wanted to also take this brief moment to extend appreciation to the National Marine Sanctuaries Office of American Samoa, Superintendent Atotasi, and John Armour and Noah and ONMS, and all the federal partners that took the initiative to come to American Samoa to have this workshop. And I agree. I think we can agree, Atotasi, that, and I have the thread of emails that goes back and forth on trying to set this agenda and making sure that it would be meaningful. But I think you all agree with me, John, Atutasi, and everybody, but that this setting, I think was much better than what was originally planned, and allowing for it to be in a public and open setting where members of the community could come and listen as opposed to a closed session was much more meaningful. So I'm very thankful on behalf of the Governor, Lieutenant Governor, and the people of American Samoa that you were amenable to that request. Just a few two more comments with respect to this proposed sanctuary action. As you heard, there has been no confusion, and I said the same thing last night. There is no confusion with American Samoa's position. And I think, John, you spoke to the importance, those 5 takeaways that you're taking home with you, the importance of the tuna industry, commercial fishing, to the economy and people of American Samoa. So there is absolutely no confusion about that. The other point I wanted to make is, you know, in the Western and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission, it prevents any action in the commission that causes disproportionate burden to any small island developing state or participating territory. And likewise, actions by the federal government should also take those into consideration, that any disproportionate burden to the small economies that continue to be marginalized and underserved are taking into account. And I'm glad to hear, John, that you, as one of the takeaways. But before I close, I do want to say a reminder. You reminded me in the last point that you made about the National Marine Sanctuary not going away. It's here to stay. about 20 years ago, when the current Marine Sanctuary was created, there were promises made to American Samoa that have not been fulfilled. One of them is a marine science lab that continues to be a priority for the territory, and I put that up for your continued consideration. I know there was a letter that came from J.D. Mavishi just recently to the governor saying that there is no funding for a marine science lab. But again, I remind you and the NOAA Office of International Marine Sanctuaries that that was a promise. And when you make a promise in our culture, you keep those promises. Although it's 20 years later, better late than never. And then for consideration also is we're having challenges with enforcement in not only in the region, but locally as well. And likewise, I ask that your consideration be given to allow for some funding to support DMWR and the American Samoa government to enforce these special management areas and marine protected areas that are in the territory. So I put that on your plate again. I don't think those two things are ever going to go away, just like the sanctuary is never going to go away. But yes, putting it back on your plate. Final thing, I apologize, I've been remiss. Senator Stevenson, Alo Stevenson, please forgive me for not recognizing you sooner, but we have Senator Alo Stevenson that's been with us all afternoon. It shows the importance that he feels these issues are to the territory, and he's been a proponent of commercial fisheries in the territory for decades, and we're very thankful that he's taken the time out of his busy schedule to be with us today. So So in saying that, one final announcement before I offer it to Dr. Anga for our final prayer. Please be reminded of the governor's reception for those of you that have received invitations and need a ride up to the governor's mansion. There'll be a van transporting everybody from the front of the auditorium here at 4:30. The reception is at 5:30, I believe. But there'll be a van transporting people back and forth up to the governor's mansion. It'll give you a good opportunity. It's a great view. You can see a lot of fruit bats, and hopefully you can see some highly migratory species in the harbor as you're up there. See some tuna. But you see a lot of, it's a great setting up there, and you'll see a lot of flying foxes. And finally, I think that's the only announcement. And then finally, again, I reiterate appreciation to Anu for doing a tremendous job. Can we give Anu a round of applause, please? You know, as you can probably see over the last 2 days, Anu, we are very emotional people when it comes to our passion to things that we find important. And likewise, I think you see that in Palau where you're currently residing. But that's how Pacific people, that's how the Samoan people are. We're driven by alofa, we're driven by our love and our faith. And those are the two key things that drive the Samoan people. So as we started yesterday with a word of prayer, asking God to guide our meeting over the workshop over the last 2 days, and likewise we close it with a word of prayer. So I ask Dr. Anga to please lead us in a closing prayer. Faftaitele lava, and God bless.
Tātou tatalu. Lea tuae lo mātua li alo whae. Ia vi ia ma vi ia pēr lo suafu pa ia. Mātou te whaaftai atu mo le nei whanatanga. Whaaftai atu mo le nei mawhatanga ua maea ma le while mu. Lo mātou tama, ua e sila fia o mātou loto. Ua e sila fia o mātou wha moe moenga. Le mātou tatalo se e alofa mai. Se Italia ia o mātou wha moe moenga vai vai e peo na whailoa atu
i le nei fontaga. Aua le nofo le lei, ma le soifua manuia o mātou tangata. Anga le lei taitai o le mātou atunu, taitai whale mālo, tupu mai o le atunu, taitai whale anganga. Mai le pito matua se i atu i le tamaititi le mātou tamā, anga le lei ai lātou. Anga lei mātou mālo mai fafo, se teimi o lātou e fo i atu nunga mau, ia pui pui a pe i lātou i o aolofa. O le mātou te talo lea, whai aelo fina ngalo pa ia, ai le o mātou loto whaatau anau. I le suafa o Iesu Keriso. Amen.
Just a commercial break. For those of you, we love to make sure that we are healthy and wealthy. Tomorrow morning at 5 a.m., if you want to play pickleball, 5 a.m. at Diwa. And thank you to all of you guys who came this morning. That was fun.